Although the cast of Everybody Loves Raymond was adored and the show was incredibly popular, not all of the actors lasted for the whole run, and none of them were pleased with the farewells. For a variety of personal and professional reasons, some people quit the show. Others were driven by various reasons, such as taking advantage of new chances or resolving scheduling problems. However, why would someone who was a part of something significant and well-liked simply quit? Let's attempt to investigate the actual causes of some of the cast members' departures from one of the most well-liked comedies ever. Roberts, Doris. Fans worldwide felt as though they were bidding farewell to a second family when Everybody Loves Raymond ended in 2005, following 9 heartwarming and humorous seasons. Almost like that noisy, crazy, but endearing family you can't help but love, the Baranas had ingrained themselves into our lives. Doris Roberts' portrayal of Marie Barone, the quintessential controlling mother, was at the heart of that mayhem. With her acerbic remarks, intrusive behavior, and unexpected outbursts of intense affection, Marie left a lasting impression. Naturally, many fans anticipated seeing Doris in another TV role shortly after the show concluded. However, that didn't actually occur in a significant way, leaving people to question why. First of all, it's critical to realize that, unlike some actresses, Doris Roberts did not depart the show. The cast of Everybody Loves Raymond remained intact. With the entire ensemble remaining together and displaying the same amazing chemistry they had from the start, the show finished on a high note. In actuality, the show's makers deliberately chose to terminate it when it was still very popular. Even though saying goodbye was difficult, everyone, including Doris, respected that choice. It was difficult to split ways with the cast after nearly 10 years because they had grown to be like family in real life as well. Marie Barone was more than just another acting role for Doris. In interviews, she once claimed that Marie was a character with whom she genuinely identified. Marie was multi-layered. She was fiercely loving, proud, and occasionally even vulnerable, but she could also be a pain in the ass. Audiences sensed Doris' genuine passion for the part. People's perceptions of her and Marie essentially merged over time. Such a bond with a character can be advantageous as well as detrimental. On the one hand, it's a tremendous achievement. However, it makes it extremely difficult to go on. It was difficult for Doris to find another role that was as fulfilling or significant. The fact that Doris was actually rather picky is another important factor in her decision to hold off on taking on further TV employment. She wanted to do things on her own terms after working for 9 years in a tough, well-known sitcom. She didn't want to be relegated to the conventional position of an old lady or portray another mother-in-law. She didn't want to be confined, and she had range and significant acting skills. She therefore focused on other things rather than taking jobs that didn't interest her or working on projects merely to get paid. Furthermore, that location was truly rather remarkable. After Raymond, Doris Roberts went back to her theater origins because she loved the stage so much. Long before she became well-known, stage playing had a significant role in her early career. It was creatively satisfying to her. It gave her the opportunity to develop in ways that comedy acting occasionally couldn't. She also began blogging more frequently, offering her extensive career's experiences and ideas. She actually wrote a memoir titled Are You Hungry, Dear?, where she freely discussed her life, including her experience on Everybody Loves Raymond, as well as her challenges and victories. In addition, Doris increased her involvement in advocacy and philanthropic endeavors, particularly in relation to issues impacting senior Hollywood actors. Because she had personally witnessed ageism in the entertainment industry, she spoke out against it. She advocated for greater respect for mature actors, who still had a lot to offer, and more opportunities for them. She valued that type of job, even though it wasn't as glamorous as TV parts, and she made a difference with her voice and platform. She did not entirely vanish from our screens, of course. She appeared as a guest on several television programs, including Hot in Cleveland, SVU, The Middle, and Law and Order. However, she largely chose not to accept any further significant, long-term TV roles. Nothing else, in Doris' opinion, could compare to Marie Barone. She had previously produced something so legendary that it was difficult to top, not because she couldn't play other parts. Following Everybody Loves Raymond, Doris Roberts led a more subdued yet incredibly satisfying existence. She continued to perform in minor roles, write, advocate, work on stage, and spend time with her loved ones. Fans were deeply affected by her death in 2016. However, she left a remarkable legacy. As a groundbreaking actress with decades of outstanding work, a wicked sense of humor, and a heart as vast as her skill, she is more than just Marie Barone. There was no common cause why the second name left. For everyone in the show, it was actually one of the most heartbreaking farewells. Boyle, Peter. In contrast to several actors, Peter Boyle, who portrayed the iconic Frank Barone on Everybody Loves Raymond, stayed on the program. From the very first episode in 1996 till the last one in 2005, he was present. However, it may seem like he left too soon because he died in 2006, just after the series concluded. He did, in a sense. Not in the usual way of leaving the show. Sort of manner. Fans felt as though they had lost a piece of the Barone family when he left the planet a year after the finale aired. He was one of the most memorable characters on the program because of his witty banter, deadpan delivery, and delightfully inappropriate remarks as Frank. Fans started to notice something in the last 2 seasons. Frank, played by Peter, occasionally appeared to be more in the background or had fewer scenes than he once had. There was a lot of conjecture as a result. People questioned whether the authors had begun giving other characters more attention or if Peter had chosen to reduce his position. In actuality, Peter was discreetly handling a lot of things behind the scenes. Even in the early seasons, he had been dealing with health problems for years. He had fought cancer at one point and experienced a heart attack in the 1990s. Shortly after the show started, he also suffered a stroke. These were serious problems. These were severe illnesses that could have been fatal. Peter, however, never showed it. In every way, he was a pro. He continued to learn his lines, show up to work, and give the performances that made Frank Barone famous. Peter persevered in the performance despite his health issues. He didn't request a written dismissal. Unless it was absolutely essential, he didn't slow down. His level of dedication reveals a lot about his character. Being a member of Everybody Loves Raymond was something he truly enjoyed. To him, the actors and crew were more than just colleagues. They resembled an extended family. Simply by seeing behind-the-scenes interviews and cast reunions, you can tell. Something about that group was unique. Brad Garrett, Patricia Heaton, Doris Roberts, and Ray Romano were all very tight, and Peter was in the midst of all of that. For him, it was more than simply another acting job. It was a location he was comfortable in. Stories from the set actually describe how Peter kept everyone laughing in between takes. His dry, sardonic sense of humor reflected his personality. But he was also really considerate and kind. He gave it his all even when he wasn't feeling well, according to others who worked with him. Although he would have benefited from a little more time or relaxation in between scenes, he gave it his best once the camera started rolling. It is uncommon for someone who has already achieved so much in his job to exhibit that level of passion. Peter had already established himself with strong performances in drama and comedy before Raymond. In Young Frankenstein, he portrayed the monster. He received Emmy nominations for a number of his performances in Taxi Driver. By the time Everybody Loves Raymond arrived, he had the opportunity to relax, but he chose not to. He put all of his energy into playing Frank, and it paid off. His name became well known to a very different audience. He accomplished this by portraying one of the most irritable and hilariously direct television fathers ever. Everybody Loves Raymond ceased on its own volition in 2005. The show ended on a positive tone. The performers and creators believed the time was perfect and didn't want to prolong it merely to keep it on the air. Peter participated in both the farewell and that choice. There was no off-screen drama or dramatic exits. All the main characters were still present as the beloved program came to a respectful conclusion. Regretfully, Peter died of heart disease and multiple myeloma less than 2 years later. He was 71. His passing was a shock to the cast. Ray Romano has openly discussed how hard it was to lose Peter so quickly after the show's conclusion. The entire cast got back together for his funeral, and they all agreed that working on Everybody Loves Raymond was one of the most memorable experiences of their life, thanks in large part to Peter and the other cast members. Peter Boyle left Everybody Loves Raymond for what reason? In actuality, he didn't. He remained to the very end. He persevered despite aging and illness, never letting it stop him unless it was absolutely essential. It felt like such a sudden loss because he passed just after the event ended. However, he devoted himself fully to that position until the very end. Frank Barone continues to live as a result. Fans continue to recall his sardonic wisdom, quote him, and giggle at his remarks. Despite his physical departure, Peter Boyle is still very much present on film. Sweetened with Madeline. Everyone who watched Everybody Loves Raymond was familiar with Madeline Sweeten, who played Ollie Barone. Being the eldest Barone child, she distinguished herself in the part with a charming, somewhat sardonic charm. Despite the fact that she was performing with comic icons like Doris Roberts, Patricia Heaton, and Ray Romano. She was just 5 years old when the show began, and she was a teenager by the time it concluded, which was 9 years later. She spent almost 10 years growing up on set, leading a life that most children can't comprehend. However, Madeline didn't immediately pursue major Hollywood roles or another sitcom once the show ended in 2005. Rather, she performed something that is quite uncommon for a little actress. She stepped back. In actuality, appearing on a popular television program can have both positive and negative effects, particularly if you begin at such a young age. It makes you famous and opens doors, but it also puts a lot of pressure on you. Pressure to maintain a particular image, act a specific way, and appear a certain way. The celebrity and attention that accompanied Everybody Loves Raymond became too much for Madeline to handle. Millions of fans adored the program, and she was frequently viewed as ally rather than her true self. She came to the realization after the show's conclusion that she needed time to discover who she was outside of that role and the Hollywood cocoon in which she had been raised. She didn't want to quit acting permanently or despise the profession. All she wanted was room to breathe. To develop and live her life free from the public's relentless scrutiny. Being famous as a child might occasionally rob you of your youth. Madeline obviously wanted to take back part of that time for herself. She thus took a break from the mainstream industry rather than embarking on another major undertaking. She concentrated on being a typical young adult, taking care of her mental health, and living her personal life. Something many kid stars do not get the opportunity to do. She eventually returned to acting, albeit in a much more subdued and self-sufficient manner. In order to express herself without the immense pressure that comes with being in the spotlight, she began taking on voice acting and roles in independent films. Even though these ventures didn't garner much attention, they allowed her to act as she saw fit. And to be honest, that speaks volumes about her personality. Fame for its own sake didn't appeal to her. She desired to lead a balanced and healthy life in addition to doing important job. Why, then, did Madeline Sweeten quit Hollywood or Everybody Loves Raymond once the show concluded? She didn't leave because something went wrong, though. She left because she desired more from life than just not being famous. She desired to discover her own personality apart from the persona she was known for. It was a courageous move, particularly in a field that frequently encourages up-and-coming actors to do whatever it takes to remain relevant. She opted for mental tranquility over publicity instead. And even though we might not see her on our TVs every week anymore, her tale is all the more admirable because of that decision. Sweeten, Sawyer, and Sullivan. It's difficult to forget Jeffrey and Michael Barone, those two lovable twin brothers. They were crucial to the story and were portrayed by Sawyer and Sullivan Sweeten, who were twins in real life. Together with Patricia Heaton, Ray Romano, and the rest of the amazing cast, they contributed to the humorous and realistic depiction of a chaotic family life. However, what took place after the show concluded? And why did the twins completely stop performing? You must keep in mind how young they were when the show began in order to comprehend their choice. At the tender age of 16 months, Sawyer and Sullivan were cast on Everybody Loves Raymond. That's essentially infants. After that, they grew up on sets with adult actors and production workers, in front of cameras, and under studio lights. For over 10 years, it was all they knew. From the outside, such a life seems glamorous. Fame. The opportunity to appear on a popular TV show, and red carpets. However, it can be extremely overwhelming for children. They were learning lines, hitting their marks, and growing up on a TV set rather than the traditional method of growing up, which included school buddies, weekend football matches, and birthday celebrations. Both sons were about 10 years old when Everybody Loves Raymond came to an end in 2005. For any child, let alone one who spent their whole childhood in front of a television, that is already a challenging age. The lads and their family made the deliberate choice to leave the profession and resume a more typical life when the show concluded. They weren't attempting to ride the fame train or pursue other roles. On the contrary, they returned to their family in Texas, attended school, and made an effort to act like typical teenagers. In many respects, that choice was made to safeguard their mental well-being and provide them with an opportunity to live outside of the demanding Hollywood environment. Unfortunately, it can be difficult to go from being a TV kid to just a kid, as many child stars will tell you. This abrupt change is occurring. In a classroom, you move from being well-known and involved in a high-profile endeavor to being just another student. This change appeared particularly difficult for Sawyer. Sawyer reportedly battled despair and a sense of alienation in the years following the show's conclusion, while Sullivan remained largely private. He tragically passed away at the age of 19 from self-harm in 2015. Fans were shocked by his passing, which also raised awareness of the mental health issues that many former child actors deal with when the cameras stop rolling. Although the Sweeten family's experience is tragic, it serves as a reminder that children may react differently to celebrity, particularly early celebrity. Sawyer and Sullivan were genuine children with real problems, but Jeffrey and Michael were viewed by the public as charming, humorous members of a comedy family. They didn't decide to quit the business because they didn't want to fail. It was about growing up on their own terms and finding serenity. Unfortunately for Sawyer, that tranquilly eluded him. Meanwhile, Sullivan has mostly avoided the spotlight. He has occasionally mentioned his sibling and their common experience. However, he has largely opted for privacy. And who is to blame? Living a quiet life could be the best course of action after growing up in the spotlight. Their tale gives Everybody Loves Raymond's legacy a poignant undertone. Millions of people enjoyed the show, but behind the scenes, two little boys were negotiating a much more complex world than what we saw on television. It serves as a potent reminder that child actors are children first and foremost. And that walking away is sometimes the bravest thing they can do. Chris Elliott. One of the most notable guest appearances on Everybody Loves Raymond was Chris Elliott's portrayal as Amy's eccentric brother, Peter McDougal. His persona was eccentric, awkward around others, and added a completely new sense of humor to the Barone family dynamic. Because he was so strange in the greatest way imaginable, Peter immediately won over fans despite just making a few appearances. Nevertheless, he vanished as fast as he emerged. Many fans have been curious about what transpired. Chris Elliott left the show for what reason? Surprisingly, the response isn't really noteworthy. There was no controversy, no creative disagreement, and no behind-the-scenes conflict. Scheduling issues and Chris Elliott's already full schedule were the main causes. Elliott has always been more of a creative nomad, in contrast to many performers who land a single, long-term role. He managed to balance writing, comedy, and acting all at once. Even while it was a great gig, Everybody Loves Raymond wasn't his primary priority at the time, it was just one aspect of his career. Beginning with Late Night with David Letterman, Elliott has a lengthy background in comedy and television. There, he gained notoriety for his quirky personas and unconventional humor. He has written for television, appeared in cult comedy films like Cabin Boy, and played other TV characters, such as the hilarious one he had as Chris in Schitt's Creek years later. Thus, it was more of a side project with Raymond, rather than a sustained devotion. Although he was never intended to be a regular fixture, his guest role gave the show some flavor. Having other things on his plate, Elliott left. Not wanting to be on the show was not the issue. Priorities and timing were the only factors to consider. He appeared and proceeded to the next creative task after making everyone laugh with his masterfully clumsy rendition of Peter. It's kind of the charm of a career like his, to be honest. Always changing, always unexpected. Fans may have wished for more Peter McDougal, but his brief and sweet tenure only served to heighten the character's impact. Katherine Helmond, one of those well-known faces that immediately infused the screen with elegance and charm, was Katherine Helmond. She portrayed Lois Whalen on Everybody Loves Raymond. Deborah's mother is snobbish and frequently comically so. Even though she didn't appear in many episodes, she made a big impression each time. Her absence in the subsequent seasons was undoubtedly noticed by fans, who frequently questioned why she didn't return more frequently. In actuality, there was no drama or tension behind the scenes that led to her leaving. In actuality, it was rather straightforward and based on her personal decisions. Katherine Helmond was a well-known actress with a lengthy and prosperous career by the time she played Lois. Her most well-known roles were in vintage television programs like Who's the Boss? And soap. She had also earned a respectable spot in television history. She had no intention of seeking to resume a full-time acting career when she joined Everybody Loves Raymond. She was actually rather picky about the employment she took on and semi-retired. Although she still liked acting, it was no longer her primary emphasis at that time in her life. Katherine had made the decision to spend more time traveling, spending time with her family, enjoying her personal life, and simply removing herself from the spotlight. She just no longer found the hard schedules and long hours of conventional TV job appealing. She had earned the privilege of working at her own pace and choose when and how to do it. She therefore chose to make sporadic appearances on the show rather than committing to a regular role. Her choice was fully respected by the show's creators and actors. Her sequences were carefully planned to maximize her little time, and they were simply glad to have her on board whenever she was available. No one wanted her to leave, which is why her job was limited. It just reflected her current stage in life and work. She didn't quit the show because she was frustrated or because she didn't agree with the creative direction. She just wanted to relax and enjoy her life as she saw fit. And to be honest, most people can respect that. Every time Katherine Helmond made an appearance, she brought her trademark style and wit to the show. Fans were deeply impacted by her performances, despite the fact that she did not appear in every episode. The reason why Raymond is loved by all. Why did millions of people adore it so much? There is a very basic yet potent idea at the heart of Everybody Loves Raymond. Family. Ray Barone, a sports writer who lives in a home just across the street from his parents, Marie and Frank, is the main character of the show. And Robert, his older brother. For a lot of individuals, this arrangement seems unreal. Who hasn't had a brother who knows how to get on your nerves or a parent who calls a bit too frequently? Despite their regular arguments, mocking, and butting heads, the family members are bound together by an indisputable relationship. The genuineness of the family relationships was what made this realistic. Everybody Loves Raymond maintained realism, in contrast to certain comedies that depend on ridiculous stories or fantastical characters. Simple, everyday irritations like Marie's controlling behavior, Frank's rough demeanor, or Robert's jealousy of Ray's family life were frequently the source of the humor. The essence of living near family was encapsulated in the show. The funny, the bad, and the good. The familiar complexity of familial love is the subject of the show, which is likely why viewers found it so compelling. Though it never seemed to be trying too hard to be humorous, Everybody Loves Raymond's writing was always witty. Although occasionally sarcastic, the humor was dry and quite organic. These deadpan remarks, which Ray's character frequently made, brilliantly encapsulated the frustration of handling family dysfunction. The supporting cast, which included Ray's wife Deborah, his parents Marie and Frank, and brother Robert, were all so well-drawn that they each contributed an own kind of humor. This show was unique since it featured more than simply jokes. Beneath the humor was a great deal of heart. The writing and acting contained moments of sincere love, annoyance, and comprehension. The event was notable for striking a mix between humor and warmth. While you were laughing, you were also aware of the realities of family dynamics. Flawed, complex, and incredibly affectionate. The cast was a major factor in Raymond's success and why everyone adores it. Ray Romano was immediately likable due to his everyman charisma. Portraying the man who is merely trying to survive and support his family without going insane. Deborah, played by Patricia Heaton, provided the ideal counterpoint. She was relatable and frequently the voice of reason, but she was also very real because of her own peculiarities and annoyances. After that came the parents. As Marie Barone, Doris Roberts was a master at portraying the controlling, intrusive mother who was hard to resist. Frank, played by Peter Boyle, was a tough, no-nonsense father who occasionally showed affection. Additionally, Brad Garrett, as Robert, contributed this endearing blend of insecurity, jealousy, and kindness. These performers' connection was outstanding, giving the family a real, lived-in sense instead of a staged one. The show felt more like you were listening in on a genuine family's discussions and arguments than a produced sitcom, since the actors got along so well with one another. Audiences were drawn in by that organic movement. In 1996, during a heyday of sitcoms focused on family life and realistic everyday situations, Everybody Loves Raymond made its debut on television. Its simplicity and sensitivity were what made it unique. Other performances maintained it comfortable and familiar while aiming for large, ostentatious setups or showy moments. A TV show that seemed like comfort food, a place to relax and laugh at the things we all go through, was enjoyed by many people in the late 1990s and early 2000s who were juggling busy lives. The play was ideal for that cultural moment because of its tender humor and affectionate depiction of family life. It wasn't an attempt at being provocative or shocking. It was simply frank and humorous about family. And they wanted precisely that. Reruns and streaming made it available to new audiences and encouraged devoted fans to return. The characters' tales served as a sort of cultural benchmark for what a traditional family sitcom ought to be. People still suggest this type of TV to friends who want to binge-watch something endearing and humorous. The caliber of the writing and performances is demonstrated by the fact that it still seems fun and relevant today. The show encapsulated a timeless and universal aspect of family. Regardless of the decade you're watching in, its themes of turmoil, love, and humor are universal. The video comes to an end. Let us know what you think by leaving a comment below. For further uploads, remember to subscribe.